Hi everyone, and welcome to this Target Jobs webinar, how to start a career in teaching and without postgraduate qualification. My name's Phoebe, I work for Target Jobs and I'll be the host for the session today. So today we will be discussing different options you have to get paid, get qualified and get experience in the profession, as well as what makes you a great teacher or mentor and how you can stand out from the crowd when making an application. So today we're joined by Martin from the National Tutoring Program and Ibras from Department for Education. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please pop them in the questions tab. We'll be using an upvote system, so if you see a question that you like, give it an upvote. So let's get to know our panelists. So Martin, if you could tell us a bit about yourself, your role, and how you got into teaching or mentoring.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. In terms of me personally, my background, I trained as a primary teacher 15 years ago now. So it was quite a long time ago. And at that point, I went into supply work. I registered to do some supply work. And I ended up working in education recruitment then for the following 15 years. I was always based in Manchester and specifically focused on providing teachers and teaching assistants to some of the most vulnerable children really across Greater Manchester. A lot of that time was spent arranging tuition for students that weren't in full-time education. And certainly a lot of time spent working with special needs schools as well, although I did do quite a lot of primary and secondary as well. So that was my background. My current role is I work on the National Tuition Program. I will tell you a bit more about that as we go in through this session now. My specific role within that is I'm the program manager for the Academic Mentor Program. And again, I'll go into a lot more detail about that as we go in through the rest of the presentation. Yeah, so that's me and that's my background.
Okay, lovely, thank you very much. And Ibra, if you could introduce yourself as well, just tell us a bit about yourself, your role and how you got into teaching.
Okay, so a little bit different. So I used to work in the media. So I ran a radio station for a number of years and then worked for the BBC for a number of years as a journalist, and then made the big decision to get into teaching, which I've never regretted. But I followed the PGC route, became a teacher because I guess I was somewhat forced by family. My sister was a teacher. My other sister was a teacher. My dad taught. His dad taught. So I thought, you know what, this is I have to get it under the belt, under my belt, type of thing. So became a teacher about 7 years ago. I've got experience having taught primary, secondary, a little bit of FE, and have lectured at university as well. And I work for Get Into Teaching, and as I'm sure many of you know, but I'll go into more detail, of course, later on. Essentially, we're an advisory service, and now we get other potential candidates into teaching by getting them onto teacher training courses.
Lovely, thank you very much. Thank you both for introducing yourselves. So we're going to go to our first question. So can you tell me a bit about your organisation and what it does? Martin, if you could tell us a bit more about how an academic mentor is different to a teacher, and if you both have had any experience on doing these programmes yourself. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, I'm more than happy to kind of kick this one off. Like I say, I work for the National Tutoring Organisation. Now, it was actually set up on the National Tutoring Programme. It was set up around 18 months ago as part of the government's response to school closures and children that have been the most impacted through lost learning, really, through everything that's happened over the last couple of years. It's the programme itself. It's funded for 3 years. It's a government programme. And there are 3 main pillars or 3 main options that schools can access to get the tuition in place for their students. The one I'll be talking about more is the academic mentor route, and that is significantly different than the other 2 routes. So academic mentors are employed full-time by the school. They are given a set of students to work with, and it's mostly on small ratios. So the advice is, and best practice is, that they are delivered in groups of 1 to 3. So much smaller, obviously, than mainstream teachers. For children that have got significant barriers to learning, maybe in receipt of EHC plans, would really benefit from one-to-one support work, that option is available there as well. So that's the main difference, really, I suppose, between a teacher and a mentor. Very, very much small group focused. A lot of mentors as well will spend their time in their core subject and may deliver across different key stages, They may be working with different year groups as well. Some of the work can be really intensive exam prep. It may be an ongoing program of recovery where it's about trying to plug the gaps that are there academically. Sometimes it can be around how the schools can actually engage that learner back in the learning process so that they can continue to engage and develop more in the rest of their classes. So yeah, that's a very brief kind of overview of the program. There's a lot of information, and I would advise as well, I'll take any questions on this as we go in, but there is a lot of information that is on the website. It's nationaltutoring.org.uk. If anyone wants to head over to that website, I'll put a link in as well shortly. There is information on there with a lot of FAQs as well. Like I say, I'll take any questions as we go in.
Thank you. Can I ask, do students need a degree to apply to be an academic tutor?
Yeah, that's a question for me. Yeah, yes, they do. The current requirements are that all applicants have got either a degree or hold QTS to be able to get onto the programme. Whilst it's desirable that people have got experience of working with children, it isn't an essential component. And the reason why is there is a 65-hour 2-week training programme, which has been specifically written for academic mentors. It is distinctly different. It's a very bespoke course around mentoring. So it focuses really heavily on how to engage with small groups, how to really track that progress, catering for different learning styles, behaviour management. There is a lot of content that's in those 65 hours, and that's delivered by Liverpool Hope Uni, and it's online. So it is really accessible. So even if you haven't got that experience already, it's a really good pathway for you to kind of develop those skill sets before you start enrolling in the school.
Thank you very much. And Ibra, I'm going to come to you next. Same question. Just tell us a bit more about getting into teaching.
Okay, so getting into teaching, I guess, similar to Martin, I guess that there are loads of facets that I could go into, but in a nutshell, we're an impartial advisory service set up by the DFE, that's the Department for Education, of course, and we sort of signpost, assist candidates or / potential teachers onto teacher training courses. So we don't run courses ourselves, but I guess we are the middle person. So if there's an individual who's kind of thinking about teaching and they want an insight into what it's like, what are the different routes, what are the different sort of bits of funding that might be attached to various routes, then they would typically log onto the website, ask for an advisor. They get patched through to someone like me, who's been the teacher, been there, sort of done that, got the t-shirt, as it were, and then we advise them into what a day in the life might be like, what the revenue streams, funding streams there might be. But we also help out with the application form proper as well. So things like the personal statement, for example, which is arguably for most course providers probably the most integral part of the application. We help out with things like that. So we offer advice, feedback. There's also the references, interview techniques, kind of like a one-stop shop for everything to do with making, to do with getting onto a teacher training course. So that's us, I guess.
Thank you very much. And what sort of related experience should graduates be looking for if they're considering a career in this area? Martin, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, we haven't got any specific degree subjects that would need to have. So it's not like you have to have a degree in English or specifically in maths in order to access the programme. We are looking for graduates. And again, in terms of experience, it would be a preference if you have got some experience of working with young children or young people. It does make a big difference. That doesn't necessarily need to be in an academic capacity as well. So what we have found is schools are looking for, very much on the academic mentor route, mentors that can really engage with young people, and sometimes children that have got barriers to learning, maybe reluctant learners. So building that relationship is really important. And the reason I say that is certainly from my previous experience in education recruitment as well. If we've got someone with experience of, let's say, for instance, youth working, that's a really powerful tool to actually be able to empathize and to actually engage a young person, and then we can start building on the actual curriculum delivery, which is heavily supported, like I say, by that training package over at Liverpool.
Okay, thank you very much. And Ibras, do you have anything to add to that question?
I mean, not really, but apart from, it kind of goes without saying that, the government stipulate that if you are an individual who's looking to get onto a teacher training course, then providers will typically, ask that you have a degree. It kind of differs a little bit if you want to, as to whether you go down the primary or secondary, as to what your degree is or should be. Of course, secondary, they're specialist teachers, whereas primary, you're teaching the breadth of the curriculum, as it were. So it doesn't matter too much what degree you have if you're going for a primary program, whereas for secondary, it matters, a lot more. But on top of that, having your GCSEs English and maths for secondary, and English, maths, and science for primary. But other than that, that's it. It isn't mandatory to have experience, so that's somewhat changed. But like just to echo what Martin was saying, it goes a long way.
Yeah,
having that.
I think as well, especially as you said there on the secondary, that subject knowledge is the key thing that
Yes.
a lot of the secondary providers are looking for. We do have some specific. For instance, I know I keep on going back towards the SEN sector really, but where we've got reluctant learners, again, sometimes it may be that they may be a little bit flexible given the requirements of the pupils, but mostly in secondary, it would be subject specific. We found a lot of primary schools will accept candidates that have maybe got a bit of a background in secondary schools as well. And sometimes they will take people with different specialisms as well. So if you had experience, for instance, as a secondary teacher, you could potentially work in a primary school. It shouldn't be too much of an issue in kind of transitioning over. But that passion and that experience and your subject knowledge, certainly in the secondary schools, is something that is the big differentiator between whether you're going to be successful on an interview or not. It's something that you can. It's that passion for the subject comes over in the interviews. That's one of the key things that I'd really stress, and we'll talk about that probably, I think, in some of the next questions, just around kind of interview support.
Yeah, I really strongly agree with that. I think, passion is everything. If you show that in your interview, even if you don't necessarily have like all the experience, or you haven't like volunteered and got that, I think that really shows and really does make you stand out. So what is the recruitment process like? How many stages are there typically? Martin, I'll come to you first again on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, what I would suggest on this, I'll talk you through the application process. It's really straightforward. Everything's done through the website as well. So if you head over to nationaltutoring.org.uk, it is on there. There is a section for academic mentors, and there is the application process. It's one of the drop downs, and it tells you what you'll be expected to do. It is a really straightforward process. You start your application. What you'll be presented with first is a couple of qualifying questions that just ask about eligibility criteria, as we were just saying. So things like, have you got right to work in the UK? What is your qualification experience? There's a couple of questions that are on there. After that, you'll get sent a link to log you into our application process, where you enter some details about yourself, what type of work you're looking for, what your background is. Really straightforward application process. You then get the option to schedule a live interview with a recruitment partner. So at that point, when you've submitted your application, you can book your interview straight away. You can book that at a time that's convenient for you. You'll see all the time slots that come up, and you'll get a link that's sent across. You'll have an online interview with a recruitment partner in your area. They will talk through positions that are available. It's usually a competency-based interview. It takes about half an hour, and we'll touch on things like safeguarding, your experience of working with children, behaviour management strategies. And at that point then, when you're onto the programme, take your documents and we will start matching a local school to you. We always aim to get somewhere and propose schools that are within half an hour to an hour maximum kind of commute from your local address. So it's easy for you to get to. We will get you an interview with the school. At that stage then, and if they've offered and accepted, you start the training programme, which is the 65 hours. It's a 2-week block of training, and you're a permanent member of staff. The training is paid. So you only commence the training when you've been offered a position. So the training isn't a voluntary training. You are paid for that training as well. And then, yeah, you start your role. You are permanently contracted to the school. So you're on a contract with the school. It's not with the NTP. We act as the middle person there to arrange a placement for you. And your salary will be £19,000 for the year. For this year.
Lovely, thank you very much. And Ibra, I'm going to come to you with the same question. If you have a recruitment process, what is it like, and how many stages are there typically?
So I guess the first thing I would always say is that log on to the Get Into Teaching website and get yourself an advisor, because as I mentioned at the top, we've kind of been there, done that. You know, you're not just talking to a call center in the middle of nowhere. We've been through the sort of system, as it were. So once you're assigned an advisor, then what we tend to do is have a look at the person's sort of qualification background, what kind of experiences they've had, have they undertaken work experience. As I said previously, it's not mandatory, but it is something that we kind of suggest or recommend. We always say, look, even if it takes it's quite common for individuals to say, well, how long should this work experience be? We always say, look, if you can walk away having done even a day at a school, but you have an insight and you know this is the career for you, then it sort of answers your question. We then, as we get closer to October, typically that's when the portal opens. And don't forget, it used to be UCAS. It's now changed. It's Apply for Teacher Training now, so it's kind of like a government website. As we get closer to mid-October, when the portal does open, then we get our candidates to really start thinking about creating the personal statement. Now, as I said before, the personal statement is arguably the most important part of the application form. First section is, why do you want to teach? And that's where we want to see things like, the motivation behind your intentions and your application. And the second part is, what do you know about the subject that you're teaching? So, what is it that you know about primary? What sorts of experiences have you had? What subject knowledge do you know if you're doing a particular secondary subject? Fill that in. The rest of the application is very straightforward, very similar to UCAS. Sort out your references, and then really come October, we'd like to have most of our candidates with their sort of mouse hovering over the send button. If I'm completely honest, it's fairly straightforward, but it does involve a little bit of lining of the ducks, as it were, type of thing, but it's pretty straightforward.
Thank you very much. And we have kind of breached upon this question slightly. What makes a candidate really stand out in their application form? Like, what do you typically look for in a teacher or a mentor?
Is that to me, or is that? Are you throwing that to Martin?
Yeah, throwing it to both of you. But if you wanna start this question,
do you want to take this one to start with?
Yeah. Why not?
Take it.
Yeah,
you take this one.
No worries. I guess it's the. I mean, a lot of these skills would you'd associate with many jobs, but I think off the top of my head, I would say being a good teacher, or a good candidate, we sort of looking for individuals who are incredibly well organized. You will find, as a teacher, you'll find yourself spinning lots of plates, and so the last thing you want to be doing is sort of either being too focused on one particular thing, or sort of being scatty-brained, as it were, kind of being all over the shop. So we do need individuals to be pretty focused, because there's a lot going on in the classroom. You've got assessment, lesson planning, feedback, all that sort of thing. The second thing, which having a journalism background, I would really push, would be having excellent communication skills. Ultimately, you can have, I believe, the most knowledge in the world, but if you can't relay that and impart that knowledge to every single child in the classroom, then have you really done your job? I would also say being creative is incredibly important, because you know, the last thing you want is a lesson where you're standing at the front and you know, getting your students to kind of rote learn a particular concept. That's not really how it works. You know, you want your classroom to be engaging, you want there to be lots going on, you want there to be questions being fired, you want people talking to each other, you know, students really kind of absorbing what you're trying to say. And then the other two things I would say, you know, I've touched upon this already, but you need that subject knowledge as well. And a lot of candidates at times are a bit wary of this part, because they think, you know, how am I going to learn key stage 1, key stage 2, or, you know, if you, or secondary 3, 4, 5 type, you know, how am I going to learn all of that? But it's like anything else. You plan, a little bit kind of sinks in, you do it for the first time, a little bit more, you speak to other classroom practitioners, and eventually it becomes second, it really does become second nature, and you know, you find yourself being an expert, as it were. And I guess the final thing, you know, being a teacher, you can sometimes find yourself, you know, being kind of left alone to your own devices, but you know, it really does require an individual to be a team player. You know, gone are the days where you were just, it was you, your desk, and 30 children. That's, you know, it doesn't work like that anymore. There are loads of other agencies, loads of other classroom practitioners that you're having to kind of riff off, SEN coordinators, senior management, parents. You know, there are loads of you know, people involved in the process that you need to work with, and which is why I think being a team player is really integral as well. So just a few of the kind of elements, I think, that what goes into making a good teacher, I think.
Yeah, I agree with all those. Do you have any tips for how trainee teachers could be more organised? Like, do you plan everything out? Do you keep it all like in a notebook? Like, do you have any tips on that?
Yeah, I mean, each to their own. I mean, there's some. I mean, I was one of these list people, if I'm honest. It was completely satisfying me if I could get a pen, and even if it was the smallest thing,
Cross it off or give it a
crossing
tick.
it off, and that would be a little sort of mental win for me, type of thing. But other people kind of really prefer having structure, so just kind of doing the same thing day in, day out, and that for them, that kind of works. Other people kind of just have these massive sort of boards on their you know, wall kind of charts on their walls, as it were. It just, again, ticking things off, traffic light systems, you know, each to their own, type of thing.
Okay, thank you very much. And Martin, I'm going to come to you with the same question. So what makes an applicant stand out to you?
You chose well in going first there, because I'm struggling to find anything else to kind of add in. I think that's a really comprehensive kind of overview, really. And just to echo, I think some of those main characteristics, certainly flexibility and adaptability, you know, especially when you're working in those small group situations, you never quite know what you may encounter in that session, you know, and if you're certainly working with someone who's had or is facing barriers to learning, there may be so many other external factors that may be influencing their engagement on that day, that it's being flexible enough to reflect, very reflective as well. I definitely will put that on there. Someone that can actually review what's gone well in a session, what didn't go well, and almost being your own critic to go, that really worked when I engaged with that pupil. This really didn't work when I did this, so I won't do that again. And being open to feedback as well, and constructive feedback, and not taking that as a criticism of your practice, I think is really important. But yeah, flexibility and adaptability, like I say, you never know what you're going to face, and you may need to drop your plans quickly and adapt either in a different learning style, deliver different content, deliver in a different way, or sometimes, depending on the situation that you're in, it may be actually park the learning objective for at least a small period of that session to actually find out maybe what those barriers are. And I think that's one of the benefits of being an academic mentor as well. You are someone that this pupil isn't always working with, so you may become that trusted person that is away from the classroom, that they can say, okay, this is what I'm struggling with, this is where I need the support, and then you can really get into the detail and actually provide that support for them. Peer working, exactly as you mentioned as well, drawing on good practice from other people. I think one of the benefits of, certainly like with big trusts as well, you have got big peer networks that are available, where you can see what good practice looks like. And sometimes even looking at maybe what practice could be improved with people and thinking, actually, okay, I wouldn't have done it like that, and I can see why that didn't work, and I will apply that to my own learning as well. And building that relationship, that's definitely something that we would look for, and I've always looked for. It's that ability to engage, and it usually comes from a passion in your subject, a real passion for working with young people, and that will shine through. You will get that engagement, and then you can start actually working on that curriculum delivery and seeing that progression and that engagement right the way through.
Yeah, I agree with all those points. Yeah, thank you very much, Martin. Just going to move on to our next question now. So what are the best and, if any, worst aspects of teaching or mentoring? Ibra, I'm going to come to you first.
Okay. Best aspects, I guess. It's the best job in the world, isn't it? I mean, teaching. Let's be honest. Although Martin probably say tutoring or mentoring is probably the best job in the world. But it's for me, as a classroom practitioner, for me, what the best thing in the world was working with the children. I mean, and if you're not doing it for them, then I think you kind of have to question why an individual, why as an individual you're in teaching. I mean, if it's not about the children, then, or your pupils, your students, why we're doing it, type of thing. So for me, it was always about the children, and because my specialism was primary, I really loved sort of standing in front of them and the whole sort of performance type of thing. And it is a little bit more of a performance when you're at primary and secondary. It's a bit more of imparting that sort of depth as opposed to the breadth of knowledge. But imparting that knowledge, getting to know the children's strengths and their weaknesses, and working together in a kind of collegiate environment that you've kind of created, and ultimately they are your focus. So especially as a primary school teacher, you get these 30 sets of eyes at the beginning of the year, and it is going on that that journey, that Lord of the Rings kind of journey, where you're kind of starting and you get right to the end, and they are completely different individuals by the end of it, and 99 times out of 100 better for it, and you learn yourself as well. As Martin said, it is, reflection has a massive part in teaching. And so as much as the children are gaining from you are gaining as well as a practitioner, as the sort of months and years sort of roll on. And the more that happens, there's a word that we use a heck of a lot in myself and my peers, is resilience. You kind of gain that resilience and that sort of armor where you're able to deal with a plate falling. I was talking about spinning plates. A plate might fall, or things might go south, and you just have to deal with it, and you come up with creative ways of dealing with that the more you do it, because it's down to experience, of course. But for me, working for the BBC was a privilege, but being a teacher was just, I would say, special. So
Oh, that's lovely to hear. I think as well, you are like a role model to the students. They kind of look up to you. So in a way, it's really rewarding, really rewarding to go into.
I mean, the only thing I would say, you also mentioned the worst. Worst is a naughty word. We don't like to use words like that. But I would say the most challenging part of the job would be, and I mentioned it before, is just trying to be organized, and I go back to that analogy, spinning plates. There is a lot on being organized and trying not to kind of take that into your kind of personal life type of thing, because you should really have time to clock off as a teacher and enjoy everything else that you do. But because it's a vocation type of thing, you do find teachers taking their work home, and fine, it happens occasionally. It happens in any kind of sphere and sector. But you don't want to be doing that too much, and you learn not to do that. There are ways around it, as Martin mentioned. Peer assessment, utilizing class feedback. There are clever ways to kind of get around that. So that's what I would say is the most challenging part. I'm going to throw it to Martin now, because I've spoken too much.
I'll carry on from exactly where you left off. I would completely agree with you, and that was probably the most challenging bit that I found with the job. Was the thing that makes a good teacher is that passion, and to actually make that impact, and the fact that you're so invested. However, with that comes the fact that it's one of those vocations where you can always do more, and there's always more that you can do. You can always plan a lesson in a bit more detail and get better resources, and keep on going and going and going. And it's kind of deciding where you can draw that line and think, okay, the fact that you want it to be better is a good thing, but there's got to be a healthy balance between, okay, that is good. That is a good lesson. I've got everything planned. And not taking it personally when it goes south, because I've done that as well. You spend the full weekend gathering resources for a full topic, and you get in on day one and it just goes out of the window and you have to drop it all. So it's kind of making sure that you're able to manage that yourself, and go, yep, okay, I'm really invested. That is enough though. I've done enough there. Let's focus my energy now on either the work-life balance and focusing on maybe other bits of another plate that also needs spinning at the same time. It's very similar in a way kind of to recruitment. There's always things that you can be doing more of. It never ever stops. But if you focus so much on one thing, it's very easy to take your eye off something else. So it's finding that balance of spread where you can actually invest your time to get the best reward. In terms of reward, I think when you're actually seeing a change in behaviour or engagement from someone, and that that's as a direct result of a way that you've approached something, and it could be something that's academic, it could be something really pastoral as well, where you've really unlocked a barrier to learning because of some strategies that you've implemented where that child can manage their behavior a bit better, and they don't, respond in a negative way to a challenging situation, or you see a real progression in phonics because you've actually adapted what you're doing to meet their learning style. And I think that's where mentoring sits really nicely hand in hand with full class teaching. It gives the teachers, I suppose a mentor really can have the impact that a teacher would love to have, because you're only working with a small focus group, So I think they work really, really well hand in hand. But I think that moment where you're seeing that progression and that development, you're going to struggle to kind of beat that, really, I think, in terms of a job satisfaction kind of standpoint.
Yeah, definitely. Conscious of time, so I think I'll ask you both one more question and then we'll move on to the student Q&A. So what support can students expect when training to become a teacher or mentor? Martin, I'll come to you first.
No worries. As I mentioned at the start, the first thing that we would do before you actually start delivering any mentoring in the school is you will be accepted in the school. So you do your interview, the school would accept you and put you onto a contract. You then commence your training with Liverpool Hope. That is a 65-hour course. It's over 2 days. It has been written specifically for this programme. So there are different areas that are in there. There's some essential content, which is around safeguarding, legislation and specific education acts that are in place. So the real basic foundations for people that are maybe new to the education sector. There's then some core knowledge that's in there as well, which is all about different learning styles, how you can engage with small groups, focusing on best practice, lesson writing, planning, both medium and long-term planning, assessments, and then there is the subject-specific content that we go into as well, or not Liverpool Hope Deliver. So it's around half of the time you would spend in your specific subject. So if you were working in a secondary school doing history, then that's what your sessions would be afterwards. So you do your whole learning in your group, and then you would break into your history groups, and you would get access to loads of resources, really specific content that's based on the curriculum that's being delivered. For instance, if you were working in primary, you would also have access. So if you said you were going to do primary English or primary literacy, at the end of the program, you also get access to the primary maths and science resources as well. So you really specialize in one key area, but you've got access to all the rest of the resources as well. So if you do end up covering other little bits, or it may be you're working with a specific child and they want support in English and maths, you might do 15 hours worth of English, 15 hours worth of maths. You've got access to both sets of resources there. So that's our key bit of training that's in place. Following that training, there is an aftercare team who will make contact throughout the program just to make sure that you're okay, see if there's any additional support that you would like on a one-to-one basis. But there's also sessions that are being delivered as well through the NTP. We are sometimes getting external providers in to deliver that. So it might be specialists from different universities, different, depends on what subject it would be. So there's loads of different topics that we'll be running as well. Yeah, there's a platform that's just being developed as well, where all of that content will be captured. So yeah, quite a bit of CPD there.
Yeah, some great support there from NTV. Yeah, thank you. Ibra, come to you with the same question. What support can students expect from getting to teaching?
Yeah, so I guess you typically register and get put into a pot. Now it kind of depends on where you are as a student. So let's say you are in your final year, then it would be my colleagues at the TTA kind of departments who are the teacher training advisors. They'd be looking after individuals who are in-year candidates. And as I mentioned, they kind of help out with things like the actual application process. So you're looking at things like references, interview techniques, all that sort of thing, getting your house in order, and they help out with that. Now, if you're a first year or second year student and you're not applying for that year, but you're not looking to start, I beg your pardon, that year, but the year after, then that's where we kind of come in. So we're early engagement advisors, a part of get into teaching. And so what we would do is we would look at the speak to the individual, see if they've got the prerequisites, so a degree, if they might have they might be on the first year, second year type of thing. So we capture that information along with their GCSEs and make them realize that if there is something that needs to be retaken, then let's start doing it. But they also would know that, and we would tell them this, that there are certain institutions that offer equivalencies to GCSEs and things like that. So that's what I guess the purpose behind us is, that gone are the days where it was just your standard PGC and that's it. The landscape has changed. There's a plethora of sort of teacher training courses. You've got things like skits, school direct, salaried, unsalaried, assessment only, troops to teaching, PhD programs or researchers in schools. There's a huge amount out there, and so it's our job to kind of put all those options on the table for our candidates, and then say, right, what do you think? What might suit you? Suit you best. After that, we kind of encourage individuals to do work experience. Now, again, it's not mandatory. It's not an obligation on candidates. However, it goes a long way. And first and foremost, it gives you an insight into what the career is about. And it's great because there's not a hell of a lot out there where you're able to kind of try before you buy type of thing. So we do urge individuals to do that. Also helps out with a personal statement, like I said, and it helps when you're sitting there in front of academics and course coordinators at the universities or the school. You can talk about the experience that you've undertaken. So that's another reason why we kind of urge people to do that. After that, we kind of get individuals to think about where they want to apply, because a lot of the courses differ. A lot of the courses have their Ofsted reports. And so, one course might be great for one person, but it might not necessarily be, someone else's cup of tea. So we get candidates to think about that. And then we get down to the kind of nitty gritty whereby we offer that insight and that help when it comes to the personal statements as well. So one, why do you want to teach? And secondly, what do you know about the subject area that you're looking to go into? And we kind of do a back and forth type of thing where we get the statements and then kind of apply feedback and comments and all that kind of thing, throw it back to the candidate, they then throw it back to us and we throw it back to them type of thing. So by the end of it, you should have something that, really is a strong, robust looking personal statement. And then the service we then pass the file on to our TTA and then TTA colleagues, and they kind of look after the rest of the application, as it were. So it's pretty in depth and pretty well-rounded service, I'd say.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Just wanted to
Nice.
touch back again on the work experience point that you made. How long would you suggest in the work experience for? Like, would 1 week be enough to stand out on your CV, or would you say like a little bit longer?
Yeah, I mean, how long's a piece of string? So it just depends on the individual. And there's no, you don't have to do a week. You don't have to do 2 weeks. But I know individuals who've done work experience for a year. So 1 month a year. That's what they've done, and that's what they've decided works for them. But I always say, as long as you can kind of walk away having done however long you've done, but if you can walk away having answered the question, is this the career for me? It might be a no. It might be, we're hoping it's a yes, but it might be a no. Then the work experience has kind of done what it was meant to, what it was meant to do. So 1 day, a week, it's really down to the individual, but we certainly recommend that you undertake some.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think and it's a long time ago since I applied on a PGCE, but I think the recommendation at that point was that you've got at least 2 weeks worth of experience.
That's right.
Of
Yeah.
And like I said,
thank God those days are gone.
it helped me because I went back to my local primary school, and it was for me exactly like you said, it cemented the fact that this is actually a profession that I want to do, and I probably knew that after about a week, where I was like, I can see this working. What I would probably recommend as well, certainly the benefit within the education sector is there are options there. You could go via supply, and go in as a teaching assistant, for instance, and in some cases you may get paid for that as well. So it's not even like it's a voluntary, work experience. So that might open some options for you. I know even if you have got the experience, one of the big benefits I found from doing supply, you can see good practice and poor practice all over the place, and you're going into different settings all the time. So as soon as I went into a special needs school, I was like, okay, I never really would have thought about this as a route for me, but I really like this environment. This suits me. So, but it's only from being exposed to those different environments that you know what works and what doesn't work. So yeah, I'd agree with exactly what you said. Experience is a really important thing, I'd say, and be open-minded with that experience as well. You can try somewhere. If it doesn't work out, it's fine. You're trying it out. That's the whole point of it.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, great advice. Thank you. I'm going to move on to the student Q&A section now. So if you see a question that you like, give it an upvote, and then we'll be more likely to answer it. Like I said, I've had quite a few questions on if this webinar is recorded. It is recorded. You'll be sent it straight after the webinar, and it'll also be on our YouTube channel. So I'm going to start with the first question. So I'm interested in adult education. Any thoughts or pathways around that? Anyone want to answer that one first?
Not really one for me, I would say. That the NTP in itself is funded for primary, or the funding is provided for primary and secondary schools. So there isn't anything really post-16 that we would be able to offer any kind of further support with. I'm not sure, Ibra, if that's something that you might be able to kind of expand on.
Similar, really. I mean, what I can. I mean, the Get Into Teaching service tends to focus on primary and secondary. What I would say is that the PGC helps if you're if you decide to be a secondary go down the secondary route and become a secondary school specialist teacher, then it certainly opens the doors for you, the PGC or the QTS, or both, I should say, open doors for colleges and sixth forms. But post that, so for higher education, university and things like that, it's not something that we kind of can offer advice on. And it's a completely different kettle of fish, because I know academics who've kind of might not necessarily have your typical master's or a PhD, and literally they are there because they have industry experience, and others are there because they are highly decorated individuals, in terms of academia type of thing. So they might have a PhD and a couple of masters and so on and so forth. So it's not really our bag, if I'm completely honest, purely because it's not as straightforward to go down that route.
Thank you. So another question, which is to do with primary school teaching. Is there a direct route to be able to go straight into primary school teaching? I think we kind of did talk about this in the last question, but if you've got anything else to add.
Again, there are many routes to go down the primary route. You would have to have a degree, of course, and have GCSE English, maths, and science. And when I say science, I don't mean all three. It can just be a science, biology, chemistry, or physics. And then, again, I'm going to use that word that Martin used previously. I think a bit of reflection needs to be undertaken, because you need to then think about and really assess what kind of individual am I, in the sense that how do I learn best? Now, if you're somebody who prefers the university sort of stage and backdrop, then we would recommend you going down the PGC route, which is the university-led route. If you're somebody who wants to sort of work on the job and get your hands dirty type of thing, and work within schools and kind of gain experience that way, and the QTS, which stands for Qualified Teacher Status, then perhaps the school-centered initial teacher training, which is which is long for SCIT, or school direct, salaried or unsalaried, might be the route for you. Possibly even QTS, if you've got that assessment only, if you've got that experience. So you do kind of need to dig around a little bit, but I think a lot of self-reflection needs to be done as well, as to what type of program would suit you best as an individual.
Thank you very much. I've got another question for you as well, Ibras. Let me just share that one. Can you talk a little bit about the salaried routes into teaching?
Okay, so the salaried, so there's a route that's called the school direct, and within that there are two sort of pathways, as it were. You've got the salaried and the unsalaried. With the unsalaried, you don't get a salary, you don't get a wage, and there are usually course fees attached to that of about 9,250, which student finance will usually cover, as long as you fit the criteria, fit the eligibility type of thing. With that route, you do get a PGCE out of it, as well as QTS, and that's kind of like your school-based route. Okay. Now, running alongside that is the salaried route. Now, with that, you do get a salary, but you're almost deemed as an employee. So you're kind of there in the classroom. That's your class. That's they're the children that you're looking after. Which, if you've like Martin was saying, if you've done some unqualified teaching work, or if you've been a TA, or if you've worked in the classroom previously, that might suit you, because you're used to the environment. If you haven't done that, then it can be a little bit daunting type of thing. Like I said, you do get a salary, but you don't, typically speaking, you don't get a PGC out of it. You do get QTS though, Qualified Teacher Status. Now, they are very competitive, because of course there's a salary attached to it. So bear that in mind. They are ultra competitive when it comes to primary, because primary in itself is competitive anyway, but add a salary on top, then everybody's going to be wanting to get through that very small door. But there are other routes. I mean, depending on the secondary school subject that you decide to take, don't forget, and the information is there on the Get Into Teaching website, there are loads of bursaries out there for individuals, especially the sciences. So, and some of them are very competitive, and of course they're tax-free as well. So, which helps the back pockets, I think.
Thank you very much. Before I move on to the next question, I just want to say we're also meant to be joined by Paris, who's from Ark Teacher Training, but unfortunately due to some tech issues, she couldn't join us on the webinar today. But I've just noticed she is answering some questions in the comments. So if you have any questions surrounding being an English training teacher, please do pop them in there as well. So I'm going to move on to our next question. I want to be an EFL teacher abroad. Is this something your organisations could help me with? Martin, is this something NTP can help with?
Unfortunately not. The NTP just is focused in England. That's it. So it's schools in England that would be able to qualify for that. I did do some research a long time ago around EFL, but it was a long time ago. So I'm sure my information will be well out of date. So I don't know if that's something that you might be able to help with at all, Ibra.
I mean, the only thing I can say is that we, as a service, kind of get candidates into, try to get candidates into onto courses, teacher training courses in England. Now, once you get that qualification and get that QTS qualification, you can kind of take it anywhere, really. And if you get a PGC with it as well, so PGC plus QTS, then anecdotally speaking, it opens many doors in many territories around the world. Some of them are very lucrative compared to others. So I know working in the Middle East and in places like Australia, where they are after individuals who have PGC and QTS, can be, you know, something that people can explore. But predominantly speaking, we tend to deal with individuals who are looking to apply to institutions, course providers in England, and then after that, really, the world is your oyster. You can do what you want with the qualification, of course.
Yeah, and there are definitely organisations out there that will be able to support with that as well. So if you went down that route that you were just mentioning, I know from previous experience that there is a huge demand for, and it's highly regarded, you know, if you've got QTS, you know, and a PGCE from the UK and potentially some UK experience as well, then there are organisations that can look at facilitating a job for you anywhere overseas, you know, in different territories. So yeah, it does open doors up, but in terms of the details for supporting with that.
Thank you. Looking through the question list. Okay. Is there any training, certificate or course or program for any teacher from another country who is an accredited teacher and is planning to move down to the UK to enable them to continue working as a teacher? I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer this one, but if you can, let me know.
Well, go on, Martin. Do you want to?
Correct me if I'm wrong here. I'll tell you what I'm assuming that means. And again, if it isn't quite right, please feel free to put in the comments box. If someone is holding a qualification from outside the UK at the moment and would like to access the academic mentor route as a candidate, then yeah, we would welcome that application. The process that we will need to go through is just checking the equivalency of the qualification that you hold at the moment. I can't remember the name of the website. It used to be NARIC, and that would do a comparison between what that qualification.
I think it's called ENIC now. They've changed it. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you're right. That's exactly right. ENIC. So yeah, if you put those details in there, that will tell you what the UK equivalent is of that qualification. Now, without knowing your specific background and details, some qualifications, teaching qualifications from overseas, do translate straight over to the equivalent of UK QTS. Some don't, and may be deemed as the equivalent of a degree or A-levels. It all depends exactly where that's come from. So that's where I would advise you to look for to start with, to see what you actually hold at the minute, and then you can try and establish what that gap is. certainly if that qualification was either a degree equivalent or it was a QTS equivalent, then you would be welcomed on to the academic mentor application route, and we can support there. It wouldn't necessarily lead to a further qualification by being on the academic mentor route, but it would lead to obviously paid employment in a school doing mentoring.
I think when it comes,
that kind of answers the question.
I think when it comes to international qualifications, it's not very straightforward at all, and there are lots of kind of comparability checks that need to be done. And you're right, Martin. It used to be NARIC, it's ENIC now. Now, what we kind of give as a service, as it were, is if there are international candidates, then we offer a free verbal check. So there's an agreement that we've got with ENIC, and they will effectively, our overseas qualification team will contact the candidate and run through their qualifications and the levels of attainment/achievement, and they can come to some sort of understanding as to whether they are equivalent or not, and then that information is given to the candidate and to the advisors, and then we can kind of formulate some sort of plan as to how we can kind of go about achieving what we need to achieve. So whether that's getting onto a PGC or a school direct or whatever, but it's definitely longer because you've got things like visas to think about as well, and that isn't something that we kind of deal with, but it can become a little bit convoluted at times.
Thank you very much. Very conscious of time, and I'm aware our hour is up. So that's the end of the student Q&A. Is there anything else both of you would like to say before we end the webinar?
No, I appreciate everyone's time, obviously, in the questions. If anyone hasn't got round to posting a question or has a really specific question that they would like to ask as a follow-up, please feel free. I'm not sure, Phoebe, whether in terms of follow-up emails that go out after this, I'm more than happy for my email to be shared, or the customer support team as well that can help with any questions anyone might have around the NTP. And thanks again for your attendance.
Thank you. Are the students allowed to find you on LinkedIn as well if they've got any more questions for you? Yeah. Okay. And also, I've just put up a slide. So if you scan the QR code, you can see all the opportunities that Ark Teacher Training, Department of Education to get into teaching, or NTP National Tutoring Program have on offer. So if you scan that code, you'll be taken to our platform and you'll be able to browse through those. So yeah, I just want to say a massive thank you to the panelists, thank you for coming today, and to the students as well for being really interactive during this session. Okay. Thank you and bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Phoebe. Thanks, people.
Thanks.